So, Stephen, your career has evolved into becoming a social media strategist and a social media manager. How did it evolve to, how did you become and to specialise within social?
I think it was just, I was able to get into it in a time when it was right at its infancy. I've always been interested in engaging audiences and doing something different with audiences from my degree into my sort of first 3 jobs. And then through that, social media was starting to come about and brands were talking about different ways of, brands and companies were talking about different ways of engaging with their audiences and trying out new platforms. So I just sort of threw myself into the mix. And I also did it personally. I was a big fan of Facebook. I used Twitter quite a lot. And I've always sort of tried to follow the innovative platforms that have come about. And it's really from personal experience is how I fell into it and how I was able to offer the advice that I was.
And then talk us through some of those key roles that have sort of formed you as, being the social media expert that you are today.
So initially I started, yes, originally back in the day, I started off mainly in broadcast production and commercial video making and things like that. And I think through that I learned a lot about looking at how to use video to engage audiences and how to do something different. And then from that I moved on to more into marketing agency role, more of a planner, really. It's a traditional planning role. And that was really interesting because that was definitely a lot more way of making me think strategically about things and about engaging with products. And that was really fascinating. And then I guess from that role, I ended up doing a lot more into sort of Facebook advertising as well for different brands, because that was still new at the time, like 3 or 4 years ago. And then from that, I've always taken an interest in trying to do it social media works, which makes a difference. It's interesting. I always wanted to do something a bit more different, which is why, again, I moved over to Ingenie and took a big step in my career from very sort of executive role to managerial role, and looking at taking a new brand that doesn't exist yet and taking them to the next level and helping them get started in social media. Ingenie was a youth brand. They were looking to bring out a brand new product to the market, and personally I can see a way of engaging with the new audiences and doing something different and interesting that no one else was doing. So I grabbed that, and that's why I moved into that role. And then from there, Nokia became like a next traditional thing of moving from a company that was like a startup. I wanted to get back into the agency world, so moved back to Wonderman and ended up doing stuff for Nokia UK. And I think that really gave me a chance to understand how big brands work and how big comm strategies work and how massive audiences, what you need to do as a brand to interact with massive audiences. That was quite fascinating, because also bringing a lot more of a customer service level with audiences, because these are people, Nokia UK fans are people who absolutely love Nokia, they're hardcore Nokia fans, they've followed the brand for years, they want to get involved and they're very passionate. And that can be positive and a negative as a brand. Like if you want to move forward, it's hard to move forward when you've got people trying to pull you back and keep you where you are. So that was fascinating. And then from there, Nokia was great, but I wanted to do something a lot more wholesome. I wanted to do something where I'm using social media for good, but also working with a company who really had a mission and a chance to make a difference in the world, which is why we moved to Ingenie. Which is why I moved to Quarto Studios, because they were I was quite interested in the education side of things, and I've done some work with children and youth brands before and some other agencies, so I wanted to work with them to look at an interesting product that was really going to make a difference in the world, and that was fascinating. And I really enjoyed there also moving on from just doing traditional social media marketing to moving in a lot more doing traditional marketing and looking at marketing as a whole, as a 360 view of doing a lot more PR and doing a lot more outreach, especially with target audiences like schools. Schools are really hard to get into, teachers are really busy, but they want help, they want difference, they want change, and that's what I sort of fell into and found quite interesting.
You mentioned the sort of, social media becoming involved as part of the, it's now part of the overall marketing strategy for brands. Where do you see that going? How do you see that further evolving in 2015?
I think this year, especially for big brands and companies, it's going to have to be keeping social media at the centre of everything they do. It's the one channel where everyone is guaranteed to go and find content. It's the place where as a brand, you have to have everything there. You have to be prepared for people to be asking you for new content, throwing customer service questions. It has to be the centre of every brand, of everything that goes on. I think, so for example, like the Super Bowl is that you spend trillions of pounds on a huge advert, but the first place you go and find it is on Twitter 2 days before. And I think it's really important to make sure that this year, especially, that social media is at the centre of everything. I also think that this year, especially with content, with Facebook changing their algorithm and Twitter introducing more advertising, it's going to make it harder for brands to engage with audiences as freely as they have done before, without spending money. And I think this year especially, there's a bigger focus on making sure you have innovative, engaging and different content, and something that's going to move people and mean a lot more to people. I think people are sharing a lot more, but it has to be interesting and different content, and it has to be sort of brand related as well. And I think there's also can be a focus too much on sales, of having to sell something. I think this year it's a lot more about humanising everything that you produce and everything that you make. With channels like Instagram becoming bigger than Twitter nowadays, it's about getting on those channels and making sure your content is also channel relevant as much as possible. So making sure that for Instagram, it's not just about having a very heavily graphically designed image, it's also about having something that looks very human, very like something you can interact with, something you can imagine in your home, in your life. And that's what content has to be about this year. And I think it's going to be interesting to see the brands who will win through, the brands who are looking to make a difference and happy to make a difference and really want to challenge where they're going.
Fantastic. Now, in terms of individually your strengths as a social media, you've worked agency side, you've also worked client side. How do you see having gaining both experiences? How has that helped shape you as a strategist and a social media expert?
I think I now understand a lot more about what people really want and having to work out exactly what people want. I think being client side is great because you get to understand the whole company and you get to have the channels, but it's hard sometimes to convince the person, the senior directors or people within the company about exactly what they want to get out and what they expect from social media. And I think sometimes as being a social media within a big company, within a company, you can sometimes feel trapped, as innovative, and it's sometimes hard to think because you're always trying to fight and trying to make people understand. Whereas I think being an agency side, you're within an environment of creative people who really want to do something different and who are really willing to make a change and do innovative things for their clients. But then sometimes you miss the key things with brands. It's about being within the companies. It's hard. The communication channels can sometimes be hard and be different and be elongated because there's more layers to go through. But they both have great aspects to them, and I think for me, if I work agency side, I have more because of my client background. I have more understanding about what exactly I know what that client wants. I know the questions their bosses are going to get, but also from a client side, I know how to look after an agency. I know what to speak to an agency about. I know what they're going to be looking for and the things they're going to be able to do and how they're going to be able to go through and also their timescales and process, and making sure that everything you can understand.
Now, in terms of sort of your next role, what are you ideally looking for? What are the challenges that are you seeking and sort of the goals that you're looking to get out of your next role?
I think ideally I'd like to, for me, we'd work for a brand or company who is innovative and different and who wants to really make a difference with the content they make or produce, and really looking to make a change with their social media. So whether it's an agency with a brand who really wants to do something different, or a client-side role where they're really open for ideas and they're really up for change and up for development. I think for me, either of those ways. I think my key strengths are more about more strategy and ideas and about looking at a problem and looking at ways for them to work it out and for ways for them to engage more with their audiences. I think that's really what I'd like to do a lot more of. So really strategy and engagement and ideas are really my key standings. But I'd also quite like to work for a company where social media is used for good to try and change something. So companies who have one mission and one direction and they're looking to make a difference in this world is something I'd really thrive in an environment of doing. I think there's so much brands and companies can do that they're not doing at the moment, and it'd be quite nice to be involved with those where social media is also used as a tool to really spread a message and spread a word. It's not just about sales, it's about a feeling, it's about emotions, it's about doing something different.